recording. I'm glad you mentioned that, because Maggie is in charge of that department. And welcome everybody on behalf of the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce. Again, a very important subject matter for us to be discussing. When we talk to our members, the number one issue today is accessing employees and being able to retain employees. And the Discoverability Network is a key element of our business community, being able to tap into that human resource that is ever so important as we begin to reinvent our economy and recover from the pandemic. So I'm very pleased to once again introduce Lisa Kelly and her team. You see Boyan from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce that have been instrumental in the catalyst for bringing us the Disability Network and giving us the opportunity to create this awareness in our community and encourage our businesses to think about how they can engage our human resource populations that will openly declare as a person with a disability. There's really just significant tools that are available through our partnership with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. And we really appreciate their support for us here in our community. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Lisa. And Lisa, you can start by introducing yourself and we will go from there.
Well, thank you very much, Rory. And thanks to Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce. I mean, you guys are such a valued partner. Appreciate everything that you do. Dawn does. Maggie, welcome. Delighted to, be here talking today about the Discoverability program. My name is Lisa Kelly, and I'm a programs manager at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. And we have a program that I want to talk to you about today. But I also just want to talk to you about looking for jobs in a different way, or if you're an employer, recruiting in a different way that we think can be of benefit to you, especially as we come out of this, COVID, which has been so challenging for everyone. Can you see my screen, Rory?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm going to talk today about hiring for ability. And I think that is the essence of what we want to do. And actually, if you want to follow us on social media, I believe our hashtag, Boyan, if you can pop them into the chat. Boyan Mitrovic's joining me as well. He's a programs manager. Our at symbol is at Hire Ability Now. So you can follow us and learn more about some of the things we're doing on there as well. So I thought today we'd talk definitely about my program, the Discoverability Network. So before you all hang up, it's free. Okay, this is an initiative to connect businesses with job seekers with a disability. So it's free for everyone. I want to start with that. I'm not trying to sell something. I'm actually trying to just connect two groups of people that face their own unique challenges that we think can benefit each other. I'm going to talk about hiring for ability. And I'm going to say, for job seekers out there, if any of your students or if any of you are job seekers, how we need to really explain to employers what our abilities are and not focus quite so much maybe on disabilities. Any discussion that I do around this topic invariably comes back to disclosure and accommodations. So we'll mention that, and I'll take your questions throughout. Boyan, if you can monitor and share any questions that pop up, and I'll pause occasionally and ask you if you have questions, and feel free to unmute and ask your questions. There's no such thing as a bad question. I was on a seminar yesterday and somebody asked a question and it turned out everybody else put in the chat, oh, I was thinking about that too. So the odds are, if you're wondering, so is everyone else. So start the conversation rolling and let's make sure that, we address any concerns or issues or questions you have. So what is the Discoverability Network? Well, look down on the bottom right-hand corner and you'll see the OCC, and that stands for the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and we call ourselves the indispensable partner of business. And we're comprised of local chambers of commerce, over 150, and boards of trade. All right. And that represents about 60,000 businesses across the province. And we regularly have discussions and talk about topics that are in the news. And one of the things we know is connecting with talent, and the right talent. And for job seekers, it's connecting with the right business for jobs that you enjoy and have the abilities to do. So we created the Discover Ability Network. I'm going to share this deck out with Dawn and with Rory and Maggie so that you can get a copy of it after. So you don't need to take notes, just sit back and relax and think about those questions and pose them. The program consists of 3 primary elements. So the first is a job matching platform, okay? And it's a platform unique in Canada. First of all, it's free. Secondly, it's for individuals who have a disability to connect to employers who value that and understand that the benefits that a person with a disability brings to a job, right? So it's unique in that way. Next thing we do is we offer free training. So maybe a business is really eager to get started hiring, but you're not quite sure how to do that. So we'll help you with free training, how to provide accommodations, what a disability is, how to encourage disclosure, what are your obligations under the AOTA. We're here, you call me, Boyan, if you can pop my email in the chat. If you have any training questions, I'm the person to contact, Lisa Kelly at occ.ca. We also offer training to post-secondary institutions and job seekers. And finally, we're creating networking events. That's where you can connect directly to maybe service providers in your area, to employers, and to job seekers. And we all have honest conversations about disability and hiring. So you're going to see this a couple times because I really want to tell you, I have more employers than I do currently have job seekers. So I really want job seekers to sign up to connect to employers. They're looking. As we open up, people are facing labor shortages. So we want to make sure that, you know, we connect you to the right job at the right time, and for employers that we connect you to the talent that you're looking for. You see that you can sign up as either a job seeker or a business. Why? First of all, this is a gigantic market, okay? This is fast growing, and it is the largest diversity group in Canada. 22% of Canadians self-identify as having a disability. That's the equivalent of 6.2 million people. Now, generally, when I talk about disability, people get in their minds what that's going to look like. So first of all, self-disclosure, I'm a person with a disability and have been for about 40 years. So disability looks like me, but it looks like other people as well. In fact, the number 1 disabilities in Canada are pain, flexibility, and mobility. We tend to think of what are called visible disabilities when we think of disabilities. So things that we can see, so perhaps someone's using a white cane, or perhaps somebody's using a mobility aid. But actually, there's a very large number of disabilities that are invisible. In fact, the majority of them. Mental health, particularly right now, I suspect this number is low, also affects a lot of individuals. It can be both a primary and a secondary diagnosis, and it affects approximately 1 out of 5 Canadians will be diagnosed with a mental health disability throughout the year. So that's a gigantic number. And again, during COVID, I think that number is probably low. So it's a large market. We can't afford as employers, you know, to avoid 25% or 22% of the market. So we need to include this group of individuals as employees, customers, vendors, peers, our bosses. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk to you about how we define disability for the purposes of our program. We don't define disability as a personal condition of the individual. So I don't define for the purposes of this program. There's lots of different models. You could have a medical model, a social model, an economic model, a charity model. There's lots of different ways to define disability. For our program, we use something called a social model of disability. You don't need to remember that. You just need to remember we define disability as a mismatched interaction between the features of a person's body and the features of the environment where they work. Okay, that sounds overly complicated. It's actually pretty simple. It means that the disability is not resident in the person. It's resident in the way we've set up our workspaces, maybe set up our hiring process. Okay, we solve those mismatched interactions by providing tools or changes, and that's called an accommodation. So really simple, disabilities are mismatches. Employers can solve mismatches by providing accommodations. It's really easy. Now, why do we use that definition? Well, because we can't solve a health condition. Most of us are not doctors. We're not medical professionals. And actually, it's not very helpful to know a diagnosis unless you're a medical professional. So if I say to you, Rory, I've got somebody who'd make a great candidate, and they come to Rory and they say, Rory, I have scleroderma, I bet Rory doesn't know what that means. Not because Rory isn't incredibly intelligent, he is, but why would we know every name of every disability that's out there? What Rory would want to know is, well, what do you do differently? How does that affect how you're going to do the job? So that I can put in changes so you can be the best you can be at your job. And that's called an accommodation. Any questions about this model? Because it's actually core to everything we're going to talk about. So of the purposes of our system, people self-identify. So we're not looking for proof. And as an employer, if you're an employer on the call, I'm going to recommend you don't look for proof. It doesn't help you, right? It's actually illegal. You can only ask somebody what accommodations they need. You can't say, prove to me that you have a disability, all right? We want people to be able to do the jobs. So sometimes we provide accommodations to people without a disability. In fact, most accommodations in the workplace, 95% of them are provided to people who do not have a disability. They're provided to people in relation to personal, family, or religious reasons. So as an employer or a manager, you're already really good at providing accommodations. You do it all the time. If somebody needs to come in late for work because perhaps they're caring for an elderly parent, or perhaps they have a scheduling issue with their, children, that's an accommodation. So you're already really good at this. It's just managing people. So now we're just asking you to extend that to a really valuable group of potential employees, people with disabilities. Okay, so what are the values? Why would I tell you that this is a good group to hire from? Well, first of all, let's talk about expectations. In a report from the Bank of Montreal, they talked to small businesses, and 77% of those small businesses who have hired people with disabilities said those individuals met or exceeded expectations. All right, so that's a really key indicator of how important this, and how valuable of an employee they can be. We also know that in terms of accommodations, only 37% of people with disabilities actually ask for an accommodation. So most people with a disability don't require an accommodation in the workplace. When they do, of that 37%, only 60% of those accommodations cost nothing. They're just free. There's changes to the way we do things. All right. 93% of the accommodations are a one-time cost of less than $500. And then if you need help with training or concepts or tools, we're here to help you. We can connect you to those tools. I can connect you to disability or accessibility or employment service providers. We're here to be your partner. Some additional benefits of hiring people with disabilities. It's a huge cost savings. In fact, businesses report that for every dollar invested in an accommodation, they get $28 of value back. All right, it saves you, millions of dollars, not individually, but collectively, millions of dollars each year in recruitment and retention costs. People with disabilities tend to stay longer on the job, anywhere from 2 to 7 times as long. So that can save you a lot of money. We know that hiring somebody with or without a disability is usually around $4,000, right? So providing an accommodation for $500 to get somebody who's going to stay longer and work just as well is a really great investment. In terms of productivity, 90% of employees with disabilities rate average or better on job performance. So they do as good or better a job. 86% of employees with disabilities rate average or better on attendance. And 98% of employees with disabilities rate average or better on safety. So we're trying to connect you to a talent pool who can do the job. That's most important. They're qualified, can do the job, will save you money by staying longer, will work as or more productively, will have as good of or better attendance, and work more safely. This is a great talent pool. Now, if you're a person with a disability on this call, I want you to really think about these qualities. These should be part of the story that you tell employees So if you're worried that somebody's going to discriminate against you or not understand what you bring, you need to really be thinking about these things and making sure that you're a reflection. Employers are looking for people that are productive. They're looking for people who will show up for the job, and they're looking for people who will stay in the job, bring value to the company, and work safely. So these are some of the things you can talk about yourself when you go out and job search. If you're an educator, these are things we should be telling in our professional practice courses or at our career center. Some of the messages we should be sharing to people about this group of candidates. So again, you see the screen, connect to businesses who want to hire you. It's free. www.discoverability.network. Okay. When you sign in, you're going to come to this page. This is just, a heads up. You can find the benefits, the things I've been talking about today. You can access resources, but you sign up on the bright yellow button or this giant button in the middle of the screen. Okay, you're going to create a profile to connect to businesses, and I'll go through how that looks. I just wanted to show you a screenshot of what it looks like. This is my own, I've had my own profile for about 4 years. You see here, I have 3 job invitations. I checked today, I have 6. So it does work. You create your profile by kind of creating a non-searchable LinkedIn. So you're going to upload a resume. You're going to put in your work experience. You're going to put in your educational experience. You're going to put in certifications. Okay, all those things. But you're also going to put in your job preferences. So what you're looking for, what fields you're looking for, and then it's going to prompt you on what skills you have. So you don't have to rely so much on, customizing a resume for each job you apply to, because we're going to prompt you on what employers are looking for. You get notified about jobs here. We'll tell you about additional opportunities. Maybe it's outside of the area that you wanted to work. Maybe you said, I only want to work in Sault Ste. Marie proper, but you're willing to go an extra kilometer. There will be additional opportunities in here that you can review. We'll also let you know about upcoming events. It's a great system. Highly recommend it. You do need to self-identify as an individual with a disability. Now, we protect this information. It's used to match you to employers that are looking for people with a disability. Now, heads up, all the employers on our system are looking to hire people with a disability. So if you don't select this particular dimension of diversity, you're not going to get those targeted job opportunities. You'll still get access to some of the 20,000 employers that aren't using discoverability, but are on the magnet system. But we also want you to get the targeted message from discoverability. So you need to self-identify as a person with a disability. You can choose other dimensions of your diversity as well. We sometimes get employers looking for Indigenous peoples, LGBTQSI plus, members of a visible minority, women, or newcomers to Canada. So it's up to you, but definitely love you to sign up as a person with a disability. Okay, let's talk about what might be different in job search or in hiring between an employer and a person with a disability. Well, first of all, non-traditional resumes. So my background is as an employment coach. I can tell you that generally employers, when you hand in a resume in person or you apply through most job boards, they're looking for keywords, a chronological resume, which shows a clear path within the industry. Some of us don't have that. So part of my job is going out to employers and saying, stop hiring for what this ideal or perfect candidate looks like, and start hiring people who are able to do the job. So really your job postings should focus on the skills and abilities that are needed to do the job, not on what someone's work history is or their education, unless those are actually needed to do the job. Where you look can change. So again, I would love you, if you want to connect to candidates with a disability, that's what our system was created for. So if you're an employer and you're not looking, you don't know if the individuals that you're connecting to have a disability. And if you're a person with a disability, you can feel confident in our system that we're going to protect your information and that our employers generally are more inclusive. Okay. How you tell your story. So people have, I call them your stories, it's how they introduce themselves. So when I first started becoming an employment counselor or even a trainer, I didn't have a background in those fields. right? So you need to be able to listen to people's stories and the skills and abilities that they bring. It shouldn't be the focus on work and definitely not on education. We know that there's no correlation between people's educational success and their success in jobs. So let's look for what we actually need people to do the job, which are, I have the abilities to do these tasks, right? If, when, and how to disclose is a big issue. So I can tell you as a person with a disability, I can tell you from working with people with disabilities, we worry about this. We worry why you want to know and how you're going to protect that information and what you're going to do with that information. So as an employer, you want to make sure you're explaining that this is because you value people and you want them to be able to start the job doing it well from day one. If you're an individual with a disability, you want to ask for accommodations and disclose if you need to, because you want to do the job well and you want to be able to do it from day one so that you're great. And if you need it for an interview and you need it to excel in the interview, ask for it then. If you're a person with a disability, make sure you're not unintentionally disclosing. So maybe you've got a social media feed where you're sharing a lot of thoughts. Just make sure you separate out your social media feeds if you're an advocate, because generally, that should be different than when we're looking as a job seeker. We should know what accommodations we need. And if you're an employer, you should figure out how to offer accommodations and how that process works and what are your obligations. So the thing that I'm going to say about non-traditional, and this is why we don't use, our system is you create a profile, the employer looks at the profile. Resumes are tricky things. People often get hired for how well they write the resume, not for how well they can do the job. So as employers, you need to stop looking for the perfect candidate and hire the right person for the right job at the right time. So again, when I started as an employment counselor, I didn't have a lot of experience, but within 6 months, I was meeting or exceeding the goals of the company. You would have lost a great employee because of that lack of experience. So you really need to be able to focus on what people actually need to be able to do for the job and interview them on those qualities, not on past experience or what was the mark you got at this university. So people with disabilities often have gaps in their resume. That's okay. There's lots of reasons, particularly during COVID, why people have gaps. Gaps shouldn't be scary things. They just mean somebody was dealing with something else at some point in their life. So there may be a gap, right? The job market closed up during COVID. People are going to have gaps on their resumes. They may have less field-related experience. Again, I know employers love experience, but I was just working with an employer who's posting 4 jobs tomorrow, and he said, I can train for the hard skills. I need to hire for attitude. There may be later entry into the workforce. There may be less paid work experience, and there may be more volunteer experience. I can tell you, as someone who's volunteered a lot, volunteer experience is as good as paid in a lot of cases, right? So you need to look at what people have actually done and assess them on that. Where to look? Well, I'm going to suggest for you as employers, look on our system. And for you as job seekers, connect to employers on our system. There's a lot of signals that you as an employer can send out that you're open to hiring diverse candidates. You could have a diversity program. You could have a diversity statement. You could put on the job, we're happy to provide you with accommodations for the interview and on the job. We want everyone to succeed in our company. Local companies are great places to look. I know for job seekers, we often have this idea that we need a big name brand company, but actually local employers are the lifeblood of Ontario's economy. 90% of jobs are going to come, private jobs are going to come through small employers, small and local businesses. They're great places to build your career. Interview and network. That's again for both employers and for job seekers. Connect to each other, have short chats. Zoom makes it so easy to do that. We don't even have to buy a coffee. We can buy a virtual coffee. And there can be some great local service providers you can connect to too. And again, we're willing and happy to do that. Okay, disclosure. Should you disclose? And if you decide, what do you disclose? I'm going to talk about it from the job seeker's point of view, and then I'm going to talk about it from the employer's point of view. So I want everyone to understand what disclosure is. Disclosure is when an individual explains that they have a disability and what changes or modifications they need to do the main parts of the job. It is not disclosing what the disability is, what the diagnosis is, or what the treatment is. All right, this is really the biggest point of misunderstanding that I find when I go out there and speak to, employers and job seekers. So you're simply saying, I have a disability, here's the change I need. So for myself, you see me wearing these lovely headsets, Boyan doesn't have a pair. I need this to filter out external distractions. Okay, so the change that I need is noise canceling headsets. It might be that you need to stretch more frequently. Maybe you have a bad back. It might be that you need assistive technology. You just need to know what that change is going to be. You don't have to explain what the disability is. You don't have to prove it. You simply have to say, I have a disability. Here's the changes. Disclosure, again, is not sharing a diagnosis or the details of your health condition. Sometimes employers will ask for a doctor's note. That's legal, and it's to know what the limitations are of what you can do. So they might ask, how much can Lisa lift? How often does Lisa need to stand? Right? So what might be some of the restrictions? So they want to make sure they're not harming you and that they're providing an appropriate accommodation. It's not to fire you. It's not to get rid of you. It's really just to help employers understand what you can and cannot do. So as a job seeker, know what your abilities are and your gaps. Okay, you may do some things differently, but you need to be able to explain that to the employer so it's not frightening or scary or different. And it's just kind of matter of fact. So what changes might you need? Maybe you need a checklist of things, right? I like checklists myself because my memory's not great. Right? So I ask many of members of my team to provide me with checklists, and we go through it and make sure that things are getting done. Maybe you need to move closer to the washroom, right? Maybe you need extra time for some heavy duty reading tasks. All right, so you need to figure out what are the things you did differently, and then you ask for an accommodation so that you can do those tasks, but with a change. Now, if you're not sure what accommodations you need, and as an employer, if you have an employee saying, I have a disability, here's where a mismatch is happening, I'm having difficulty with this, you can ask employment counselors, you can ask us, we can direct you to things. You could ask an accessibility center at your local university or college. You could ask a disability specific organization. And there's a great free tool online put out by the Job Accommodation Network called the Searchable Online Accommodations Resource. And I put the link in there, and you can search by disability for some common accommodations. It's a great tool. So when, what, and how do you disclose? Well, there's no right or wrong time. And for everybody, so we clear this up, it's an individual decision made by the person with the disability. So people do not need to disclose if they don't require an accommodation. Okay. And they can disclose at any time. That's also up to them. If you disclose, you're sharing what you need to do the job, which is the accommodation. You're not sharing the diagnosis or the health conditions. I can tell you, people cringe if you start giving too much detail. I don't want to know. You just need to know what's different so that you can do the job. You're not legally required to disclose unless it relates to doing your job properly or to health and safety. And let's say you didn't disclose, but something changes and now you need to. You simply tell the employer, things have changed. When I joined, I didn't require an accommodation, but I do now. And again, tell them where the mismatch is happening. Accommodations aren't extras. They let you do your job, and people do their jobs differently in all kinds of ways. So Boyan gives training, he doesn't wear a headset. Boyan delivers training differently than I do. That's okay. Neither way is better. They're just different. So accommodations might be changes to attitudes. Maybe you want us to come in, and we're happy to do this, to give this presentation, Disability Confidence or Disability 101, to the peers or your employees. Okay. Maybe, and I'm going to go through some other accommodations that are very common. You still need to be able to do the essential parts of the job. And we're not lowering standards, we're just doing things in different ways. So what are some of the accommodations that, are pretty common in the workplace? Well, assumptions is the number one. Oftentimes when we disclose, people assume what we can or can't do. So we might need to tackle that. Happy to come in and give training to organizations about that. There might be changes to the way we communicate. Maybe we need closed captions on Zoom calls. Maybe we need to turn our camera off because we get Zoom fatigue. Maybe we need to turn our camera on so that somebody can lip read. Maybe we need checklists or written instructions instead of verbal instructions. There's lots of different ways that can look like, okay? Tools. So maybe we need a screen reader, or I'm going to pull out one of my accommodations as I get older, a magnifying glass. For those, it's kind of blurry, but there we go. I need that because my eyesight's not as good anymore. That's an accommodation. So is an ergonomic workstation, an ergonomic keyboard, an ergonomic mouse. Might be simply standing up and sitting down frequently. We may need changes to our work environment or spaces, maybe a scent-free environment. Maybe we need access to a private office for confidential discussions, or when we just need to calm down. We need a quieter space to work in for a while. Could be changes to processes, so flexible work hours. We've all learned during COVID how that works, and working remotely. Another thing we've learned that we're all able to do. 2 years ago, I would have mentioned these and everybody would have cringed, and it's become pretty common now. So there's a lot we can do that we might have thought we can't. It's pretty actually easy to make changes to. I'm going to give you some examples of some common mismatches. So perhaps we have somebody with a poor memory and they're going to be a driver for a warehouse. So the difficulty is remembering directions. Well, that's easily fixed by a GPS. Recommend it for people without poor memories as well, maybe a poor sense of direction. Maybe we have a job seeker who is anxious, all right? And we have a timed assessment. So the mismatch is the type of interview. So there's a bunch of things as an employer. We might say, do we really need a timed assessment? Or we give somebody additional time. We might even provide questions half an hour before to help the person deal with their stress or be able to look at it on paper instead of just, again, trying to process it orally. Maybe we have a disability does increase with age. Maybe we have employees that are starting to experience chronic back pain or arthritis. And the pain is interfering with their ability to concentrate for long periods of time. So we could give them an ergonomic assessment, maybe a sit-stand desk. Maybe it's just simply frequent stretch breaks. The employer gets to decide on what the accommodation is. So you, as the person with the disability, inform the employer about the mismatch. You talk with them about what are the possible accommodations, but the employer gets to decide on the final accommodation. You should still check in to make sure it's working, right? So it's an ongoing discussion. You both want it to work. So check in frequently to make sure things are going along and the accommodation's working. This is a shout out for job seekers. Tell your story better. If your story is I have a disability, hire me, that's not a reason for an employer to hire you. Employers hire us because we have abilities, skills. They can also hire us because of our work experience and our education. Maybe that's part of this. And if you do things in a different way, embed that in your story. But it's our job to communicate to the employer what we are able to do. That is why employers hire us. So here's a great example of a young man who's neurodiverse, his autism, and how he marketed himself. He simply would introduce himself to the employer and say, hi, I'm a graphic designer, I'm neurodiverse, so I experience the world differently. But it's made me aware of how images and the written word can really portray powerful ideas. It's what got me into graphic design, and I'm looking for a job where my understanding of graphics and the written word can help your business. That's a great way. It's focused on your abilities, that you can do the job, but you've disclosed that you do things in a different way, but a way that actually makes it look like an asset versus a deficit. There's some other great tools out there like Align. It's free, align.magnet.today. And if you're looking for ideas to talk to the employer about, it can give you some really great words and key strengths so that you can rethink what you're going to tell the employer. So you can use authentic statements that capture you. Telling an employer, I'm reliable, I work well in teams, isn't enough. They expect that. So you need to explain to them what value you're bringing. So, this is actually an example from mine. It helped me put into place that I'm really outcome focused. I like to get things done and I like to succeed. So that's what I drew from all these words. So you can take this free assessment. And on top of that, you can be matched to employers like Starbucks if those are your key qualities. So it's another job matching tool for people with disabilities. It's a sister system to ours. And you'll be matched on your skills and abilities. You can use the same username and password as you do with discoverability. There's a whole bunch of benchmarked roles, so you can see there everything from entry level to more senior roles like a QA specialist or a UI UX developer. And they continue to add. You're going to be hired for your abilities and your skills. So you need to know what those are. You need to communicate them to the employer. Know your abilities as well as you know your disabilities. So I often find with job seekers, they know their disability really well, but they're not so clear on what your abilities are. So that's what the employer is interested in. Thank employers for their feedback. They may say, yeah, you're just not a fit. That's okay. That happens to people with and without disabilities. But don't assume that you didn't get the job because of the disability. Ask for feedback. What could I do to improve? What else, are you looking for that I may not have communicated? And practice telling your story. Find a mentor. Find a mentor with your similar disability. They can help, and a different mentor who's in your field. If they are a person with a disability in your field, that's amazing. But sometimes we can get someone who can help us navigate some of the barriers we might encounter in the workforce by finding somebody with a similar disability. We should also find a mentor for somebody in our field so that they can help us get better at that. Employers will love that. Ask an employer for an informational interview. It's a really low-cost way for an employer to get to know you and you to get to know about an employer's business. In an informational interview, you ask the employer about his business and what they're looking for, his or her business or their business, and they will tell you what they're looking for, what kind of roles, when they hire, how they hire. So it's you doing the interview. Don't ask for a job. Just ask the employer, I'd like to know more about your company and what kind of qualities you're looking for. We actually have a workshop on this and we give these regularly, so you can sign up for that if you're not sure. So join us today. You do that by creating a job seeker profile. If you're an employer, you'll create an employer profile. The system matches you. The job seeker gets to review the invitations first. You can go check out the employer, what the job looks like. And then if you're interested, you share your profile. The employer looks at that. And if they're interested, you get notified, you can get matched, and you can start to use the system to find work. Okay, are there any questions at this point? Okay, some key takeaways. Access jobs through discoverability and the hidden job market, which is networking and mentors and informational interviews. Ask for accommodations, know what you need, because the employer can't mind read, so you need to be able to tell them. Disclose intentionally and appropriately. That means telling the employers what you need to be able to do the job well. All right. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at Discoverability. We're here to support both employers and job seekers. And thank you so much for today. Rory, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. That was fantastic. Some great information. Folks, we have recorded this. We will make it available by our website. We do have a landing page for Discoverability Network. We also have our Discoverability Network website. And be sure to check those resources at your local Chamber of Commerce with us. And I mean, this is a great program. Can't stress enough the pressure that many of our employers are feeling with regards to the supply of of individuals to add and contribute to their business. So please keep this in mind as a great alternative for your students, your clients, colleagues, family members, anybody you think that could benefit from this, whether they're in Sault Ste. Marie or anywhere in Ontario, as it is an Ontario-wide effort from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. And again, it's a super program and great resources as well, even if this is just a particular area that's of interest to you. So, and we know that Lisa and Boyan are always available to answer any questions and help you out down this path if you're investigating ways to implement this in your own organization. So Lisa, Boyan, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate everything.
Before we end, Rory, can we just stop the recording? So if people have questions they want to ask offline,